Glad the room just cleared.
Okay, so our next session, switching gears a little bit, is about kids and the internet. And our next panel is the perfect panel to speak about this. With me are Sara DeWitt, who is Vice President of PBS Kids Digital, and Jill Murphy, who's the Editor-in-Chief of Common Sense Media, which provides content about the suitability of media and tech content for children. So this is it's a big topic. It's a hot topic. In a previous panel, Julius Janikowski mentioned that one of the sort of backlashes against large technology companies today, part of that is driven also by the effect of technology on children. So Sara, we talk a lot about free and open internet. This is, I think, pretty clearly an area where some regulation, at least by parents, is required. So how should parents think about what kinds of content their kids should have access to?
There's so many ways to look at this. One thing that we should all keep in mind is that the idea that tech is bad for kids, the anti-screen-time movement, Jill and I were just talking about this back there, it's actually a very upper middle class issue. We do a lot of our testing with kids from Title I schools, do free and reduced lunch. Those parents are often desperate to get more technology into their kids' lives. They feel like their kids are falling behind. So this is a really interesting debate that's going on all the time. But back to your question of how do you choose the best content for kids. One thing to keep in mind is that kids look at technology as play. This is a game. This is something fun to do. And so we are always saying to parents, you've got to think about what your kids like to play and also what you're hoping they can learn from the experience. And so you want to look for something that really kind of meets kids where they are. If they're really excited about dinosaurs, then you want to go find like a really good dinosaur app for them to play with and read the reviews and do that kind of thing. And you want to look at who's publishing this content. And you also want to think about how technology fits into your child's life. You want to actually think about what times of day are the times that kids are going to play and make it part of their schedule. Like you're going to be able to play with the iPad on Tuesday nights while I'm making dinner. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about what you did. And I want you to show me what you played with or show me how you won it. So what we say to parents a lot is the thing with raising kids to be kind of healthy with the technology they're using is not to just hand them a device whenever you need them to be quiet, but to really think about what are the times of day and what are the times in the family's life when it's going to make the most sense for your child to be able to play with technology.
You talked a little bit earlier as well about when we were backstage about sort of combining online and offline and how kids absorb information differently and maybe better when you have the combined experience. That was interesting, I thought.
There is some really great research out there. One study very recently that came out from Texas Tech was looking at the combination of screen time and conversation. And they were looking at a PBS Kids show. This wasn't a study we commissioned, but that's one of our shows. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, the spinoff of Mr. Rogers. And what they learned was that kids who watched the show were gaining skills with empathy. It was actually deepening their empathy. But the gains were much greater if a parent talked to the kid about what they watched after they watched it. And so they also tested just parents talking to their kids about empathy. And that also had some gains, but it wasn't as great as the combination of the two. Something about letting kids kind of get into that world and then having the characters as context to talk about actually increased the benefits of the technology. So if you go away with anything today, it's talk to the kids about what they watch and play. That is a huge piece.
So Jill, tell us a little bit more about Common Sense Media. I think most folks in the audience probably know about PBS and PBS Kids. Common Sense, it's a great organization that's been around for, I think, 10 or 15 years.
Almost 15 years. I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with it and is signing up for our newsletter as we speak. We're a nonprofit organization, and so I oversee all of our ratings and reviews. So we review everything from books, games, movies, TV shows, apps. And we do it from a parent's perspective. We do it from a child development perspective. We rate everything from 2 to 18. So we're looking at everything from Elmo to The Hangover. And we know how much media is aging down dramatically, so we know that a kid as young as 8 is interested in the latest Marvel movie that might be out. So we're really conscious of the type of media that kids are absorbing and what they're ready for, and at what age. And then we do a ton of parenting advice as well. So we take a lot of that content and we put it into best lists. We put it into articles like 50 books every kid should read before they're 12, just trying to make it really easy for parents and kids to make a selection with all the great content that's out there.
And are there certain trends you're seeing recently? There's, I think, when you're saying both on the kind of very positive side, I think often, especially recently, technology has a bit of a negative implication with kids. But are you seeing sort of trends that are very positive? And then also on the flip side, it'd be interesting to hear both sides of that.
We sit very much in the middle of this whole quote-unquote debate over, it's too much content or it's too much screen time, yet we're all handing our phones and tablets over to our kids. One positive thing that has come, I'm constantly saying, kids are winning in this game when it comes to TV. There is so much great TV out there right now on all these different streaming platforms. If anything, there's too much, and it's really hard to make a decision. So that's been one really positive spin. I think that runs from the very young ages. Preschool content is really strong right now. PBS, of course, all the way up to kind of the tween space. So that's one really great thing that we've seen. Reading has been back on the rise, so that's been another really positive spin. So again, we cover all different types of media. When it comes to technology, specifically social media, we always kind of say 0 to 8 is when the parents are more in the driver's seat. We have a little bit more control over the decision making. 9 and up is like damage control. It's when parents come to us and they're like, what do I do about the cell phone? What's the right age to get my kid a cell phone? My kid's on social media. Are they too young for it? Their friends are on it. I don't know if I want my kid to be on it. It's really just, we're all making these decisions on the fly. And so we're kind of constantly encouraging parents to take a beat, take a minute when it comes to making those decisions. Don't make them too quickly. Oftentimes we hand over a phone because we bought a new one and we're going to give our old one to our kid and that's their first phone, and the next thing you know, they're exposed to a ton of content that you weren't ready for. So kind of easing into some of this has been something that we're really focusing on.
And a report you guys published recently about the effects of social media, I think it was on it was teenagers or
Teens.
Or it was on teens. I thought it was fascinating as well because I thought the report would come back and say, oh, it's horrible, it's terrible, and it had a pretty balanced conclusion that I was surprised by.
I think most of what we have been finding is fairly positive, actually. Yeah. Or I would say more of a balanced approach. Kids are, it's the parents that are concerned. We're the ones that are freaking out. The kids are kind of feeling like, I know that these are my friends online, but they're also my friends at school. They do not make a distinction between, that's my social media life and this is my offline life. Like, that does not exist. Bullying doesn't only happen online and not on the playground. So this is just, I think that's something that parents are kind of coming around to, that this is very seamless for teens, but they're also pretty sophisticated about the way that they navigate social media and kind of starting to self-manage their own habits a little bit, multitasking and that sort of thing. That's not all kids and not all teens. But I would also say that one thing that has come up again and again in the last few years of our research is parent role modeling, which, I'm so guilty of all of that, but being a role model and trying to show your kids the way that you want them to behave with their media, whether it's putting the device down at the dinner table or putting it away, not jumping for a notification, that has a lot of impact on teens especially, and younger kids.
Yeah. It's interesting. Sara, we were talking about, go ahead.
I was just going to add to this. Have you followed this idea now of narrating what you're doing on your phone? So if you think about back to when we were kids, if you were invited to a birthday party, you got an invitation in the mail, or your kid gave it to you, or you got it at school. And so you had this physical thing. You knew you were going to a birthday party. You might go with your parent to buy the gift. You were there when your mom called to RSVP. You all got out the map together to look at where you were going, and then you go to the birthday party. And now it all can happen by the parent on the phone. And the kid doesn't see any of it, doesn't know
Right.
that like, oh, now my mom is ordering the gift online, and now she's looking up where we're going to go. And so the idea of actually saying to the child, I'm looking at my email because you just received an invitation to a birthday party. What do you know, to actually include kids in what's happening on that device, I think
Yes.
is a really
Yeah.
great idea.
Yep. And also, I just wanted to circle back to what you had said before about talking to your kids. I think parents often, this is kind of our mantra at Common Sense when it comes to advice for parents. It's always talk to your kids, talk to your kids. But what do you say? You know, parents can fall apart when it comes to, it's showtime. Now I got to engage with my kid about what they just watched or read or played. So we do, and this is my shameless Common Sense Media plug, but we do have conversation starters within all of our ratings and reviews because it does feel like a little bit daunting to take on this task. And it is much easier to hand over a device and just, oh, I'll keep them busy. But I think there's very few things that our kids go out and do that we don't come home and ask them about. So kind of using that same framing of, they just engaged with something online. They're watching some other kid unbox something on YouTube, or they're watching some other kid show a room tour, which just drives me crazy. My kids love those. But you know, talking to them about, well, why do you like that? Those are essentially commercials at this point, in my opinion. So how do you try and start to help them understand what they just watched, why they're watching it? Is it real? Is it fake? There's advertising in that. Those kids might be getting paid. I mean, they're all teachable moments, and you don't have to take all of it on at once, but using a little bit of it as leverage for a conversation can be really valuable.
If you think about the dinner table, when you say, what did you do at school today? Well, what did you do in math? To actually say, what happened in that show today?
Yes.
Can you tell me the story?
Yep.
Yeah.
Especially for little kids. And by the way, kids love to talk about media. They love to tell you about a book. Actually, it's almost annoying. They'll just go on and on about a show and whatever
It's
it
really
was.
true.
At least my kids, for sure.
A mom last week I met on the edge of the soccer field told me, she's a learning specialist, and she told me that after her kids watch TV, she was very clear that she doesn't like her kids doing screen time. She goes, but when I let them watch Wildcats,
like
I
this
then
badge of honor.
I have paper and crayons out for them to draw what they watched. And I was like, okay, super mom, that's
That is like
great.
therapy.
So the next Saturday, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. So they were watching a show, and when they were done, I was like, guys, here, come to the table. I've got crayons and paper out. Can you draw, like, what was your favorite moment today? And they totally did it. And I don't think it would work all the time.
Yes.
But
And you still hate that mom for telling you.
I
But
know,
it was
yeah.
a good idea. That's a good idea.
How do we, I mean, you mentioned this before, Jill, when you were speaking, in terms of the kinds of content that the kids are getting as well. And then we're talking about a distortion between the incentives that, you know, especially folks that work at for-profit organizations have in creating content and creating apps. You know, they're motivated by, sometimes, by different metrics that are necessarily tied to what's best for kids.
yes.
How do you how do we work through that, I suppose?
Yeah, this is a major issue. The majority of game content for young kids is from the app stores. It's in Google Play, it's in the App Store, it's in Amazon. And the success metrics for those stores are what drives revenue is time spent, how long you're in the app, how many ads you see, how many in-app purchases you download. And this is trickling down into the kids space. So it is incredibly hard for a kid's content product to break through without it being huge, without it being successful on this revenue side. And that revenue is, those success metrics are not actually good for kids. Like, this is it's a real problem to be designing something that is just sucking kids in for long periods of time. And if you watch different kinds of games for kids, you can see, like, at the end of every game level, it immediately hooks you into the next one. I mean, I know grown-up games do this as well. But it's a problem for kids who don't have those executive functioning skills yet to put something down. So I really believe this is an area that needs to be disrupted. We need some models to come up that are actually focused on how do we use this technology to help kids learn and to help them gain some pro-social knowledge to understand how to put it down. It's possible to do those things with the technology, but right now that's not being rewarded. There are people trying, but they just can't break through.
Yeah, I think these are the challenges that then we hear about from parents, which are my kid is having a temper tantrum after I tell them to turn off the iPad. I might have submitted that one, but I think it's a constant battle, and the autoplay, and it doesn't stop. And I think, using the technology in a way that kind of sets up those boundaries, and with purpose, not just for the sake of like, oh, we think it's the right thing to do, but with the real teachable moments within the platform would be hugely valuable. And I think it eliminates, and will start to eliminate this generation of parents we're hovering over our kids, and like we're setting a timer. And one of the biggest increases, you asked me about trends, that has come our way is this need for parental controls. I mean, every parent is just asking us, what's the best parental control? I just have to shut off the internet. I have to shut it down. I actually think they're doing it for their spouses. But ultimately, I would be. But ultimately, they are, we're on our kids. And what are we teaching them? We're not really helping them learn and get to that executive function.
Have you seen good tools or good technology that helps people?
We don't
do
promote
this?
third-party parental controls. It's not really something that I feel like is, or that we really feel like is the go-to. We're really much more, our philosophy is really about talking to your kid, engaging with your kid, media balance, play for a half hour online, play for a half hour outside. So that really is our approach. But I will say there are a lot of companies out there that are creating the parental controls directly in the platforms that you're already using. So you don't always have to get a third-party product. Your tablet likely has parental controls. iOS just launched Screentime. We've got a lot already in YouTube's got parental controls. Netflix has parental controls. They're not that easy to find all the time, but they're there.
Yeah, it does fall back to the parents ultimately, right? It's not something you're going to start regulating.
And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with iOS 12, like with the screen time stuff, if that changes anything.
Sure.
But the experience that I've had in the kids' media production side, talking to other developers, and the things we've done as well, is parents will tell us over and over and over and over again that they want these controls. They'll even tell us exactly what they want it to do, and then they don't use them.
Yeah.
And so many folks have said this. They like the idea of it, but then ultimately it's a little too complicated to do. It's a little too hard,
Right.
And they forget to do it.
And I will also add, some people, they need that. It depends what's going on with your kid. I mean, it's not just for fun that I'm a parent and want to see every image that my kid is texting. There may be some other issues where you feel like I need more insight. So great that those products are available, but I wouldn't say that they are the first place to go necessarily.
And you'd mentioned as well that people in the technology industry clamp down the most, or let their kids watch the least amount of screen time and kind of interact with apps the least, which is ironic, given that they're the people best in place to regulate it, right? Yeah, maybe some people in this room.
I can't tell you how often I hear that from people at tech companies who are like, oh, that's great what you're doing at PBS Kids. I don't let my kids use any screens. And I'm like, if you're in the industry that's actually trying to build new technology, I want you to be thinking about how your kids might use it and not in a just I'm afraid of it way. I mean, the truth is kids are in a world where they're seeing the technology around them all the time. They're increasingly seeing it at school. They're over at friends' houses, and they sometimes get to play on their friend's tablet. I think it's much more important for the parent to be kind of setting up, this is how we use it in our house, and these are the ways that we use it. We don't bring it to the dinner table. We charge it outside our bedroom. Like all of us do that, right? We don't have it in the room with us when we're sleeping. But things like that. Trying to kind of set up some healthy habits at home early, as opposed to just letting kids kind of navigate their own way, because they are going to find all the technology.
Another topic that was interesting, you talked about, we'll talk about AI later on in other panels as well, but sort of conversational UX, right? And kind of think about and see where technology is growing, all the good things that it can do for learning and for kids. What are good examples of that you've seen out there?
Oh, right now it's really early. I'm not sure I've seen anything that I think is really fantastic. I think everybody's just kind of messing with it. I do think that there's an incredible positive potential here. So again, I work with kids who are between the ages of 2 and 8. When I started working on content for kids, we were dealing with the keyboard and the mouse. Like that was like how the kids were navigating. I mean, if you can think about a 3-year-old, they don't know the difference between left and right. Like clicking was a big problem. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to write. I mean, typing was impossible. And the technology just keeps getting easier for them to use. The touch screen was like a revolution in the kids' learning space for sure. And voice agents now, we have an opportunity for kids to interact and learn content just talking and asking questions. That's pretty huge. It means they could navigate into more information about that dinosaur or something really easily. Now, it's early days. Alexa and Google aren't asking the right kind of follow-up questions yet to kind of get in there. And parents are also pretty terrified about this. I mean, we should be thinking really hard about the privacy here. But I think there's a great opportunity for us to begin to help kids on the learning journey by allowing them to talk and listen.
And Jill, I know privacy is a sort of big topic for Common Sense Media, especially recently.
We focus our privacy work right now on the education space. There's so much, there are so many apps going into schools directly, a lot of technology being adopted by schools, and student data privacy is certainly a concern. Data privacy at home is also a concern, but as we were talking, I don't know that it's reached that critical mass yet where parents are clear what the real issue is or what's being taken or what's being reused. So everyone's kind of just like, ugh, but we're still moving forward with adopting some of the technology in our homes. So we're going to be looking at it a little bit more in next year for our consumer parenting side. But I would say I agree. I mean, privacy rather is certainly an issue that needs to be considered, and it creates challenges when you're building new platforms, when you are looking at privacy and want to create something. I think we're all expecting things to function a certain way. We want it quick. We want to purchase it. We want to swipe for it. We want the answer very quickly. But there may be a little bit of a trade-off when you want to adhere to certain privacy regulations and policies with the technology that you're going to be getting. So I think that's a little bit of why parents or consumers at large are kind of like, ugh. I think we're all very willing to hand over our privacy in more ways than we realize for the ease and quick use of some of these very cool apps.
Yeah, interesting. So we're starting to wind down here. I wanted to ask, in terms of, if there's one thing that folks in the audience, I'm sure there are a lot of parents in the audience, can take away both from this talk and just from your general knowledge about how best to promote technology and screens with your kids, what would that be?
One thing.
Or 2 things, or 5 things.
Do you have anything off the top of your head?
Well, I already said talk to your kids about what they're doing. I think it sets up a really good habit very early that media and technology is something that doesn't have to happen in a black box. It is something we talk about, just like we talk about our school day. And as kids get older, that's an opportunity to also get into critical thinking questions. Like, well, what do you think would have made that game better? Or did you like the way that character was treated? Being able to really get kids into bigger conversations. I think the other thing that's really important, so I think I've got 2 things. The other thing is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. I am asked all the time, I'm sure common sense is too, what is the right amount of time for kids to have with screens? And there's no way to answer that because you have to know your own kid and how well they are able to regulate and handle media. So I have 2 kids. One of them would watch and play all day if I let him have the opportunity. So I have really specific limits. My other one really is cool just playing for 30 minutes and then wants to put it down and go do something else. And so we have to kind of approach it a little bit differently. And you have to really know your kid to be thinking about what is going to make the most sense for them.
I would just agree with both of those things. I think we were just talking about, everybody wants a number associated with everyone wants a prescription of what is okay for my kid, because we've got our Fitbits with our 10,000 steps, and we've got a number that we're going towards for everything. And the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, used to say 0 screen time for kids under 2. Now, even they, in the last year, have come back and said, 18 months, and by the way, quality is really what matters here. So I agree. Knowing your kid is so vitally important, and being comfortable having conversations with the parents of your kids' friends is also so important. Because it'll kind of get you to that place of, oh, okay, we're all dealing with this together. And that's very personal and in your own little community. It's not something that you don't necessarily, we struggle a lot with social media and getting a presence online for ourselves. And oftentimes we're like, let's have people share their cyberbullying story. I'm like, nobody wants to share their cyberbullying story publicly. That's insane. So these are personal decisions, personal by child, personal by family. And so really being aware of what your kid is okay with. And again, not just time, but what are their fears? What are their concerns? What do you want them to learn about? There's a ton of opportunity with all of this technology, with media in general. And it's also just such a great way to get your kids talking, as I mentioned, annoying as that might be, but really engaging with them about their media choices. It's just you can use that as such a great skill building opportunity. And always media literacy, I personally feel, is just at the core of so much of what kids are going to be dealing with moving forward. So helping them to start from a very early age, really as young as 4 and 5, understanding commercials and advertising, what's targeting them, and really trying to crack open the messages that are in front of them in a pretty simple way, is a great way to start that critical thinking.
So we can't punt our parenting responsibilities to an iPad, is what I'm hearing.
Well, don't feel too guilty if you have to
Right.
do it sometimes.
I'm sure we all do it. So we have time maybe for 1 or 2 questions from the audience for our panelists. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the panel. You guys talked about critical thinking and kind of new media. How do you think about kids growing up in this post-truth age where fake news is everywhere and kids can basically find an answer to any questions they have and not necessarily the right answer? How do you think about that? Thank you.
For us, for media literacy, we really incorporate digital literacy and news literacy into that. And we actually do curriculum in schools. We're in over half the public schools in the country, and we have incorporated news literacy into our curriculum as well, because we do feel that's hugely important. But, our old parenting advice was turn off the news when your kids are in the room. You can't do that anymore. They're getting the notifications on their phone, or they're hearing about something on the playground because some other kid got a notification on their phone. So really being ready to have conversations. I mean, unfortunately, it does fall back a lot on the parents to be ready to have conversations with their kids and get a good sense of what they are exposed to. And of course, protecting the younger kids. But that train has left the station as far as notifications are concerned. So I think arming yourself a little bit and being comfortable, and I also think culturally in this country, we're very fearful of the news, and the news is fearful. But kids much younger than this, young kids in other countries are much more familiar with having conversations about war, whereas we are very, trying to keep our kids very protected. So opening up that dialogue early on is important.
Hi. Whoa, that's really loud. First of all, I just wanted to thank you both. Have actively used both Common Sense Media and PBS Kids. Have preschoolers and a kindergartner. My question was an extension of the parental controls. I do want to give my children choice because it's hard for them to not have any screen time. But do you have recommendations for how to curate? I want to provide them basically a safe playground where they can choose content, because once they have internet connection, they can get to everything. And so it's really hard as a parent to constantly track what that content is. So any advice you have on using systems or creating a curated space for them to consume content? Thanks.
Are you specifically asking about YouTube?
That is one of the places. Okay. But in general, even if you go to Amazon apps, on the television, you go to one screen, the next show comes up, and they can scroll through everything, and so you don't necessarily know. And I'd love to be able to be in front of the television when they're there, but if I have
Sure.
to be doing something else. You can't always be monitoring everything. So
Can only watch so many episodes of Paw Patrol. But Daniel Tiger, on the other hand, I could watch all day. There are a lot of parental controls, as I mentioned, but you can also, like on YouTube, subscribing to channels is a really good way to go because then you can kind of curate this walled garden experience. YouTube Kids is available specifically for that walled garden experience. You can go in and block channels. They've given you a lot more control as the user to go in and block things that you're not interested, haul videos or toy videos if you're not interested in that, but you want to focus them in a different direction. So those are two examples. There are other platforms out there. There are other apps that actually have created this walled garden for you. You can come to Common Sense Media to find those. And those are just a few things off the top of my head. But
So we're out of time.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank Jill and Sarah for a great discussion.
Okay.